Hi, I'm Ralph Rivas. Welcome to Rappler Talk. It's September and it's perhaps the start of maybe the longest celebration of Christmas in the world, the Philippines.
Right.
It's time to be merry and for some maybe a little tipsy. But with higher taxes looming for alcohol and wine, will Filipinos still buy a bottle this Christmas? Well, let's talk about that and more with Christopher Kimbo, owner of perhaps the most popular wine in the Philippines,
Thank you.
Novelina.
Yeah.
So, Chris, let's dive right to it. How's your sales before and after the higher taxes that was implemented back in 2012,
so
2013?
the tax law right now is always increasing, right? But there was a big tax reform, excise tax reform in 2012, and it was put in effect in 2013. And I think the DOF presented some of this stuff in the hearing, but the entire industry actually took a hit, right? Because of course, if you increase prices, then they become less affordable, so naturally demand goes down, according to Economics 101. So the entire industry took a hit for sure. The industry, first, before I talk about wine, is predominantly beer drinkers and spirits drinkers, right? Wine, according to some studies like Euromonitor, is maybe 3% of the entire market, maybe less, according to the DOF. But wine as a category, when you did increase the taxation, it kind of lost the momentum of its growth, but then caught up again.
It caught up at what year particularly?
So the compound annual growth rate of the category is about 10%, let's say.
Oh, that's not bad.
It's 8 and 10%.
Double digits. Yeah.
But if you look at how much, just to give you in perspective how small the wine market is in the Philippines, if you take the entire amount of wine consumed in this country and you divide it by the population, the average person is drinking 1 coffee cup worth, 1/10 of a liter per person per year. So it's still a really, really small amount of absolute wine consumed. If you go to like France, for example, they're drinking 40 liters. So imagine if I lined up 40 liters. That's how much the average one person's drinking in France, versus the Philippines is 1 coffee cup. So like a growth of 10%, yeah, even if it grew, if it doubled, it would still be so far from what the other developed countries are consuming.
But I mean, some people are saying that wine is more is healthier than other alcoholic products. But were you able to bank on that hype?
Okay, so in the hearing, of course, the medical side.
Yeah, medical said it was a myth. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of published studies that show the opposite. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not. I will defer to them. Red wine has been shown to have what's called resveratrol. It's this antioxidant that's been proven to lower bad cholesterol, so it's actually good for the heart. Now, you should never drink in excess because, like they said, if you drink so much wine and if you drink so much alcohol, of course the downsides of drinking too much alcohol is worse than maybe the benefit of the heart. But it's not so much about that. It's more about the consumption habits of how someone drinks wine versus how someone drinks a spirit, right? You probably have different reasons why you would drink a spirit or a beer than why you would drink a wine, especially in the Philippines, right?
Yeah, we only drink wine in like what?
Well, like Christmas, right?
Yeah. That's the only time that you can sell.
That's right. Well, that's when we sell. We want to sell outside of that, but yeah, in the Philippines, we actually conducted a market research study this year. So we were trying to find out what makes people buy wine. Is it price? Is it all these other things? And actually, the biggest the consideration for purchase of getting drunk, the feelings of alcohol, is such a low consideration to why people drink wine. People drink and buy wine to celebrate Christmas and their birthdays and to celebrate a special occasion. And that's something we're very proud of as a company, to be doing something like that.
To be associated with that feeling.
Of course. I mean, that's such a satisfying. And then we also found that only like 4% of people actually drink alone. So every time they're actually drinking, 96% of the time they're drinking with their friends and their family, celebrating either a birthday or Christmas at home. And that's something we can get behind as a company now. It's something we're very proud of. It's not like something where it's like people are getting drunk off of our product. I mean, I don't think that's how people are consuming our product.
Okay, so you're here to discuss about taxes. So
Sure.
How much is Novelino paying for a bottle?
Yeah, so the retail price of one bottle is about 250 pesos right now.
And then how many % of that is tax?
Well, 37.9 pesos of that per liter goes to the government in excise tax, not including, of course, income tax, right? This is just pure excise tax, 37.9 pesos. And if you were to also right now sell a bottle of like 2009 Chateau Margaux, it's like hundreds of thousands of pesos.
Yeah.
They also pay 37.9 pesos.
It's the
per liter.
same.
Yeah,
So
excise tax.
regardless of the price point,
Regardless
the
of the
tax
price point,
the
yeah.
tax is the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so you pay 37.9 pesos, and then the house version
Yeah.
is proposing to increase that by how much? Like over 97 pesos, right?
Well, for me, it ends up being 97 because they increased the specific tax from 40 to 60 pesos per liter, plus a 15% ad valorem.
valorem.
Yeah, which is what? That's almost 3 times as much already. And you know, the government already collects a lot of our income, and we're not complaining because we're very much in support of this administration. We want to be part of the solution. But what we're trying to say is that, objectively speaking, if we were to do that, the company wouldn't be able to absorb that because we're not trying to sell wine to the richest Filipinos. You know, we made a wine for the Filipino people, and we want to be able to reach the masses. We want to make it accessible to them. So because of that, our wines, because they're lower price point, are more price sensitive. So if you bake that into a Chateau Margaux, no big deal, right? Because the bottle of wine is like hundreds of thousands of pesos. But on a bottle of wine that's only 250 pesos, that's a big deal for 90% of the population when you look at the wealth distribution of the Philippines. So we just can't absorb it. Even if we tried to make our net income zero, like we would absorb all of it with our profit, we still wouldn't be able to survive because the price would still have to increase substantially.
So, given, for example, that the house version will make it all the way to law.
Yeah.
So that would cost you like how much? A bottle of Novelino
Well,
would
ironically, what would happen, and this is, I go back, right, because the 2 objectives are to lower alcoholism in the Philippines and to raise funds for universal healthcare. So the first one, to raise funds for universal healthcare, it's not going to happen because wine is such a small category to begin with. And if you make that kind of increase, you're thinking you can make more money, right, the government. But what's going to happen is we're actually going to be priced out, and wine no longer becomes affordable to the Filipino people. So they're actually not going to collect on it because the demand goes down.
And business.
Well, there's just nothing to collect. And then what's that going to do? That's going to shift people towards other drinks. And in my opinion, like spirits and beers, you're probably more likely to get a bad habit of alcoholism, I think, in those categories more so than wine, based on our market research.
Okay, so
I don't want to say anything bad about them.
Can you say as far as going as you proposing that they shift to wine?
Of course, I mean, of course, it's self-serving because I'm in the wine industry, but I think it's a beautiful thing to drink wine. I think wine. I think it's probably a better thing for people to drink in terms of alcoholism, yeah. Because as far as I'm concerned, people aren't really drinking wine, to get intoxicated, according to our market research. It's really more just to celebrate.
So what's your proposal? How much can your company take in terms of taxes?
We understand where the government's coming from. Any proposal we make is going to be in line with those objectives of raising more money for universal health care and, of course, lowering alcoholism in the Philippines. What we're trying to say is just this is where we're at right now. If you were to pass this latest version of this House bill, objectively speaking, mathematically speaking, it's going to be very difficult for us to even survive. If you just look at the numbers.
Yeah, and let me just put it out there for the audience that it is not the proposal of the Department of Finance because the DOF is proposing for from 4% to just 10%. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But the House version would increase that to over 150%?
Yeah, out of nowhere
Yeah.
too. And ironically too, I was at the last hearing where you probably heard me speak. The one previous to that, 1 week prior, what was presented from the DOF was actually, in line with the House, which was the same 40 pesos
And you were
per
okay with
liter.
that, totally okay with that?
At that point, I mean, that was much more reasonable than what we have now, right? So yeah.
So given the proposal of the Department of Finance, and for example, that would push through all the way to law, how much would a bottle of your Novelino be?
Well, I think we would be able to absorb it, definitely.
What, an increase of what?
It's from 37.9 to 40, right? So it's more doable, So definitely much more reasonable than the House bill. House bill is impossible. It would kill the entire industry.
So what about, are you proposing something like for high-end wines to be taxed this much, or the lower tier ones at
It's
this
not
one?
for me to say, right? It really is not for me to say. But of course, on my end, it would be self-serving for me to say yes. But for me, like, it's not about. I want more people to drink wine. I want more Filipinos to drink wine. Period. And it's not so much about like these people should be taxed more. We should be taxed less. It's not about that for me. Wine is a beautiful thing that should be available to all Filipinos. And the reason why we exist as a company is because we said, hey, why, if the appeal for wine is so high in the Philippines, why is no one consuming it? And so we made a product that is made for the Philippine palate, right? And that's something we're very proud of. It's not for me to say. We just want more people to drink wine. We hope that people choose our wine because our wine is made for the Filipino people.
Okay, so let's talk about the current trends. So what
Yeah.
are you seeing right now, the wine industry?
Well, it's growing, right? It's the most exciting category, I would say. So it's growing.
But do you have numbers for that? Or you can't really disclose that?
I can disclose. Well, there's a number of different studies, right? But in terms of like compound annual growth rate, the category is growing about 10% per year, which is great. But like I said, the average Filipino is only consuming 1/10 of a liter of wine per person per year. And if you go to like, Europe, talking 40, 50 liters. So even if we double the wine industry, it would still be just a drop in the bucket compared to the consumption of alcohol here in the Philippines.
Okay, so tell us a little about your company. How did it start? I've heard in the hearing that you're a 100% Filipino owned,
Yeah,
and
we're
you started.
proud of that.
Yeah, tell us about your history.
Well, in the wine industry, it's particularly hard because there's a lot of people in general in the Philippines have kind of this colonial mentality, right? That if something is imported, it's better than something that's local. And especially in the wine industry, right? I mean, naturally people are thinking, oh, if it's from France, it's good, or if it's from Italy, it's good. But we actually we're very proud now to say that we're made here in the Philippines. And if you go to wine is such a regional product. If you go to France, for example, you will hardly find people drinking Italian wines, right? And if you go to Italy, you're not really going to see that many people drinking French wines. And they're right next to each other, and they both make incredible wines, right? So why is that? Because wine is made to suit the taste preferences in the region where it's made. And the same thing goes in the US. Like, I think almost 80%, 75% of the consumption of wine in all of the US is coming from California. So they're drinking US wines, and same thing per country. So it's not surprising to me that in the Philippines, people are drinking a local wine company because we really made that wine to suit the taste preferences of the Filipino.
So what's the preference of Filipinos?
They want
Sweeter
something
or-
sweet. And this is a really common misconception because many people think that if they drink sweet wine, it's not as good as dry wine. But they need to understand fermentation. So all wine comes from grape juice. And if you get a bunch of grapes and you eat the grape is really sweet, right? But most wines that you try, mapakla, they're very bitter.
Yeah.
And that's because all of the sugars have been converted into alcohol. That's what fermentation is. Fermentation is the process of converting the sugar from the grape juice into alcohol. Actually, all of it. And most wines are considered dry. Dry means that you've converted all the sugars into alcohol. So we said, if Filipinos want sweet, how can we make a sweet wine for them? And we found we could do this process, we can innovate on the winemaking process where we don't allow all of the sugars to convert into alcohol. So actually, Novelino is lower in alcohol. Most wines are about between 12 to 15% alcohol. Novelino is only 4.5 because we don't allow all of the sugars from the grape juice to convert into alcohol. So there's residual sugar from the grape juice. And that's a very complicated process, and it's one that's more complicated than making a dry wine.
So tell us about your operations. How big is it?
Yeah, so how many employees do we have?
Yeah.
So we have a very lean organization, but we have a lot of stakeholders. Like we have a number of different distributors, regional distributors, key accounts people, and if you touch all those people, probably have close to between 500 to 1,000 people that whose jobs will be impacted by our company, but our actual company directly is very small. Yeah.
So so the higher taxes could affect all these people.
Absolutely,
thousands
it
of people.
would. It would. It would absolutely affect all of our distributors. It would affect as much as our company.
And maybe your expansion plans, if any.
Yeah, of course. Well, we always had this idea that there's more non-wine drinkers in the world than there are wine drinkers, right? And there's no one wine brand in the world that owns more than 1% of the global market. So the dream is to one day, find those people who don't drink wine, give them a product that they actually like, and it's worked really well for us in the Philippines. But maybe there's other markets, particularly in Southeast Asia and the ASEAN markets, where we can do that.
Okay, so that's a little hint that you're expanding somewhere else.
We're trying to, as much as we can, right? Yeah, because we're very proud, just to go back to the local thing, we're very proud of being local. I remember a lesson in economics from my father. He said third world countries can remain third world countries because we export our sugar at very low prices, at commodity prices, and then we buy it back in the form of candy from the same country that we sold the sugar to. And it's like, who makes the money in that transaction, right? They're using your sugar and you're buying it back in the form of candy. Of course, that country is, the first world country is. So we're very proud of reversing that trend, where what we do is we actually import the grape juice from all over the world as a commodity, and we put the value added in the Philippines. We employ Filipino people. We do the fermentation in the Philippines. And that's something I think that's better for the economy. I think that as more Filipinos understand, it's better to support local companies. Of course, we want the government to recognize that too during this whole process, because right now we're maybe the biggest wine company and we're a local company in the Philippines. But the more we realize that it's good to support local products, local enterprise, the better off the country will be, right? And I've been to hundreds of wineries from all over the world, and I'm very proud of what we do here in the Philippines. We have one of the only one of three maybe wineries to the scale of which we do here in the Philippines. So we're very proud to put the value added in the Philippines and to be tax compliant here.
Okay, you mentioned about tax compliance.
Yeah.
You already mentioned the amount that you paid last year, so that was around
just a lot, like
70.
The government, makes already at the tax code now. The government's already making I think something with income tax, something like 3 times already our net income. So what more if we triple the excise tax portion? But that's not for us to say. It's not for us to complain about. We're just giving the information, and we're allowing the government, because it's in the government's best interest for a local company to thrive, right? I mean, that should be the role of the government, to make sure that local enterprise thrives. So we're just saying, okay, this is what you've come up with. This is what happens if you were to pass, that particular House bill.
Okay, so do you have a wish list on other, I don't know, maybe legislation or maybe a little relaxation in the industry that would help your company and other wine companies here?
Well, yeah, of course, we've talked about this, right? So I talked about the consequence of the version of the House bill, about how that just more or less just kills the industry, in my opinion, entirely, because it's not really something the industry can absorb, not something that our company can absorb. In terms of everything else, I mean, you have to leave that to the government. I have full confidence in Madam Chairman and Undersecretary. They know what they're doing. They're very reasonable. They're listening to us. And in the end, I can just trust their judgment to know, too, that, we're a local company, just trying to be, a company founded on good values and tax compliant.
Okay, so it's the Christmas season I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that's what I
So
wanted to talk about.
how's sales so far?
Good. I mean, you never really know, right? You never really know until, we had the nice problem when I came into this company 7 years ago of the demand being greater than that to which we could supply. So now the last 5-6 years have been all about building an infrastructure where we can match the demand of our products during Christmas with the supply. Because it's really hard, the speed to shelf, to deliver to these shelves and making sure that your product is available. We were more or less out of stock. You'd put up an end cap of display of Novellino on Christmas, and it would be gone by the afternoon. So
Yeah, because everybody, even companies, buy it in put it in their baskets.
yeah, it's such a blessing.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a blessing to be part of that celebration aspect, especially Christmas. It's very much a value of our company. And yeah, so we just had to make sure that everyone, would be able to do that, because you can't do that if you go to the shelf and it's out of stock. You can't really give it to anyone. You can't drink it. You can't enjoy it.
So can you keep up with the demand, or how's the demand with the taxes and the more taxes coming in? So is that do you see that affecting your sales?
Of course, it will affect. It depends what ultimately gets adopted.
But I'm sure you already have projections on which version will pass, if ever, right?
Oh no, not really. I don't know what the government's going to choose ultimately. But
yeah, but on the proposal
we
of
have
the
financial
DOF,
goals, of course. Yeah, of course we have financial goals.
Mm.
Yeah. We always say too, like, our company is not even. We don't even consider ourselves a wine company. We're in the business of fulfilling unfulfilled aspirations. And wine just happens to be a category that we can do that in. And so the way I look at it is, you can't fulfill an aspiration if your product is out of stock. Mm-hmm. So how can you make sure that your product is available in as many places as possible and affordable to the Filipino public? All we need to do. And then make a product that they actually want.
Mm. So anything that you'd like to share to us, any possible plans or a hint in the coming years?
I'm not allowed to, unfortunately, but there's a
Expansion,
lot. There's a lot of exciting
going
stuff.
public, things like that.
No, I don't think. Well, not at this time, and I would definitely wouldn't. I don't think I'm at liberty to disclose anything like that, even if it were true. Listen, there's a huge opportunity in this market, and if you look at the demographics of the Philippines, 60% of the population is under the age of 30. I'm not even in that anymore, 60%. And imagine in 10 years, in 1 decade, we're gonna have like 23 to 25 million new potential wine drinkers who haven't tasted wine, but who also haven't tasted beer, who haven't tasted all these other offerings. And so that's a really, really exciting market to see what does the youth decide, because ultimately that's what people are going to follow, right? Just by the sheer demographics of the Philippines. So we want to make sure that we're a product that is appealing to them, to those people, as well as the older population, such as myself.
Okay, let's talk about you, because you're 30-something managing this.
32, yeah.
Yeah, this company. So what's your tip to those that aspire to own companies and 30-somethings aspiring to, handle such a big responsibility?
Yeah, I think the biggest learning I've had is that people don't buy what you make, they buy why you make it. And like I said earlier, we don't even like to say that we are a wine company. It's more about why we exist as a company, and that's to fulfill unfulfilled aspiration. You can take from like Apple, for example, like Apple versus Dell. Dell is very much capable of making the same products, but people always buy Apple. Why? Because Apple is not a computer company. They're an innovation company. They redefine what they are. And that's why it's so much more comfortable for people to buy a computer, an iPhone, an iPad, all these other products, because they believe with what the company believes. And that's the way that they market. Even their staff, the companies that know why they do what they do are the ones that succeed, not what they offer. So they're not telling you, the hardware of their computer on their ads, right? They're not saying that. They're showing you innovation. They're showing you these types of things. And our company, our why, is really, we want to fulfill aspirations of Filipino people because they deserve it.
So how are you as a leader? Strict or laid back?
I think I'm pretty laid back. I think I'm pretty laid back.
And what's the value there?
You want to choose the right people, because you can't, we always say that in our company, we don't want your compliance, we want your commitment, because commitment is so much more valuable than compliance. A compliant employee is someone who at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, they leave right away, but someone that's committed will stay longer, right? And so I'm not strict, just so as long as the employee or the person shows me they're committed to the company, then who am I to say what you should do? I mean, you have to allow people to develop their own sense of drive and and to solve problems the way they see it. And you have to be able to put them in positions where they can fail. And my job, I think your job as a leader or a boss, is always to encourage, but put the person in a position where they can fail. Fortunately, my staff is amazing. They haven't failed me in any way, so.
Yeah, so
They're young too, so like this office.
Okay, so what any particular products that we should be anticipating this Christmas season, or are we still expecting the same classic blends? Yeah.
Well, that's the thing about wine, right? Like, it doesn't really change, right? I mean, people want a familiar wine to them. I think if you look at the market, if you go to like a wine section, it's kind of like magulo, right? Like, there's so many different wine brands, and you don't really know what's good or what's bad. I think 99% of people just think if it's expensive, it's good. If it's cheap, it's bad, right? That's what most people think. So we just want to make sure first that when you walk into a wine section, you're familiar with the brand of Novellino. And I think that's more important, having a consistent product. Because if you want to try variety, it doesn't have to be Novellino, right? You could try a number of different wines from different countries. But we're confident our wine will be the best wine for you.
Okay, so any final words, anything that, any appeal to the government in light of these likely taxes that are likely to be passed? We're not sure yet how high this will go. But
again, our company, we want to be part of the solution, and we understand where the government's coming from. It should be a privilege to be part of this initiative, this administration to fund universal health care and to lower alcoholism in the Philippines. We can only present the facts to the government and tell them like the consequence as we see, should they take different directions, whether that's the House bill, whether that's the finance, Senate version of the bill. But in the end, we will support the government on whatever they decide. Okay,
so wait, before we wrap up, you mentioned earlier that you want to lower alcoholism. So what are the steps of Novellino, a wine company, that to help this, to address this
for
problem?
For one, remember, Novellino is lower in alcohol because it's sweet. So already as a product, we're lower in alcohol. So that's one. The second one is you look at the consumption habits of how people drink wine versus how people drink other spirits and liquors and fermented beverages, and it's different. It's very different, right? You're seldom drinking alone, and you're not most likely splitting a bottle, and you're really only drinking on special occasions. I think alcoholism is a problem where people are really addicted to the substance, where they're drinking heavily, and it takes a lot of Novellino to do that. Because it's low in alcohol, and it's not how people consume our product. It's not what we stand for. It's not what we want.
Okay, so basically, you're okay with the proposal of the Department of Finance, correct? But you're not.
I'm okay with the objectives of the government, which is the first one, to raise funds for universal health care, and the second one, to reduce alcoholism in the Philippines.
Okay, and let's leave it at that. Thank you very much, Christopher Kimbo, owner of Novellino.
Thank you.
And I'm Ralph Rivas. Thanks for watching.